Hey everyone, Margarita here. I want to talk in this video today about the timeline in which the false narrative about me has been grown from the time I was a small child all the way to the current day. This all did not just begin, a few years ago or, at some point along the way. All of the current problems, all of the ongoing crimes and harassment, everything that is going on in the current day was grown over the course of time from the time I was a very small child and has grown each step of the way, snowballed to where it is today in 2025. So I'm going to start with where it all began. Around the time I was about 4 years old, and this would have been in the 1980s. At that time, I had confronted my mother about poisoning batches of food, and I did not know that I shouldn't have done that. And that was the start of the false narrative growing about me, and that would put my life in danger, my future in danger, and would lead to all of the ongoing crimes against me and harassment all of these decades. But because I was such a young child and I was not aware of mental and personality disorders at that time, although I did know there was something wrong with my mother, I did not have the vocabulary to even begin to describe it. So by me confronting her about poisoning the batches of food, that alerted her that I was aware that she does that. And I told her that I was going to tell on her. So the only people I could have told on her to would have been a very select few family members. One of those would have been her sister, which I did try to say at some point, but she was not understanding what I was saying because, again, I also did not have the vocabulary. It didn't matter because from that point forward, once I confronted her, she began to reach out to her sister and every family member she has, which is hundreds of people, and began to grow the false narrative about me from that point forward. So, right after I confronted her, it started with her telling people that I'm always known to lie, that you can't believe anything that I say, that I'm not to be trusted, that I make things up. That was where it started with initially. And then over the course of time, those lies she was telling about me grew. And once I was in elementary school, she then began placing delusional phone calls to all of my teachers from behind the scenes each school year. She would call in the beginning of the year and tell them all this false information about me, that you can't believe anything I say, that I'm known to lie, I'm just this problem child, I create all these problems, and that they need to keep an eye on me, and you can't believe anything that I'm going to say to them. She was doing this in case I tried to tell any of my teachers how my mother poisons batches of food. And most of those teachers decided to jump on board and begin harassing me and treating me the way she did. Some of these teachers were narcissists, some were not. Some did not participate at all. Some were told the false narrative about me, and then upon talking to me or keeping an eye on me, they just did not see any of what she was saying, and there was no issue. However, about half of them continued to participate in the lies about me, the harassment. These teachers would then call my mother at work, back and forth, repeatedly throughout the course of each school year, and they would feed off of each other's lies about me. She would cause something to happen where I would go to school and I would be upset because of what was going on at home, and I was always being mistreated continuously by my mother, but it was always done in private because I have no other siblings and no living grandparents. There's no one around, and I'm not allowed to go too many places. She had full control over everything, basically. And the only time I wasn't in danger or in fear is when I was with my dad. And it did not dawn on me until about 2019 that my dad was completely unaware that this is what she was doing to me, that this was all going on behind his back. She would cause these problems and be really mean to me, gaslight me, cause reactive abuse situations where it then looks like I'm the problem because I'm being heavily gaslit, or what you would call DARVO. So that is a narcissistic acronym. So you can look into that, because that is something I became more aware of recently. But that's what she was doing to me as a child. So that way I would be in a certain frame of mind, or I would come off a certain way to these teachers she was telling these lies about me to, and it would look like her false narrative was true. The problem was I was being continuously gaslit, narcissistically abused, um, all of those terms that come along with it, along with the fact that my mother poisons batches of food, which is technically called Munchausen by proxy. And she has numerous forms of Munchausen by proxy, including withholding medical treatment, inserting herself in situations once they happen naturally, or causing the situation and then inserting herself in it, including any injuries or medical type situations, since she worked in the medical system. And she also likes to create physical, mental, and emotional pain and suffering. And she gets off on doing all of this. So I talked about that in my previous couple of videos. It is 2 parts, describing the different forms of Munchausen that she has. But when I was in school, these teachers would feed off of my mother calling them with this information, and then they would treat me poorly, um, or they would just straight up be harassing me or narcissistically abusing me as well, and then just feeding the information back to her, and they would just go back and forth all year long. And that went on pretty significantly. There were some years that were more mild where I didn't seem to have as many issues. But once I got in middle school and I had numerous teachers, there was more people involved in the harassment because there's more people in the mix in general. Now, I did have one specific teacher in high school who did recognize that my mother was the problem, that there was a serious problem. And I did not understand the degree of the problem at that point. I do believe I was a sophomore the first year I had her, and then a junior the second year I had her. I do believe my mother called this teacher in the beginning of the year, both years, tried to get her on board with what she was trying to do to me, and the woman did not participate. And after the second incident, she realized what my mother was trying to do to me, although she did not express that to me. But she did hug me, and she knew that my mother had a very malicious plan to she was trying to expel me from high school, which she eventually succeeded at my junior year of high school. Even though she attempted it my sophomore year and my junior year, she succeeded my junior year. She used a psychiatrist to give me depression medications, which was never supposed to be given to me. There was no depression. The only problems I was having was the abuse by the deranged lunatic narcissist who was creating all of these problems. I was already working a full-time job. I already made full-time money, was already making more money than her. And I still have the intake paperwork from that time period. I have a picture of it because I actually burned it when it showed up here at my house about 5-6 years ago. And you can see my answers very clearly are not a teenager who has a mental disorder or depression. You can clearly see that this is a hardworking teenager who is desperately working very hard to get themselves to safety in their own home, which is exactly what I did at age 18. So with what happened with those visits, she managed to get that woman to prescribe me antidepressants that I should have never been given. It was all on the false narrative she was feeding her. And then I knew I wasn't supposed to take them. I only took them a couple times. I knew that I was not supposed to be taking these. I chose not to take them. But the problem is, my mother was always going through my room every day. And because of that, I kept these pills that she was giving me every morning in my purse. And she held on to the bottle. And because I was a minor, and because she controlled the flow of information and how I was not allowed to learn my rights or know how the world operates, she basically set me up for failure from the beginning wanting to make sure I would have an extra hard life, wanting to create all of these problems for me. So I did not know that it was illegal to give my pills away that I did not need. I did it at my home with a childhood friend who I'd known for years who did have depression. And I don't believe she was looking for something for a permanent solution. I believe this was just a temporary time in her life. So I handed her some of those pills that I had left over, not even knowing this was illegal. And down the line, not right away, it was a few weeks later, another girl in school was asking for any type of pill. It didn't matter what it was, she was going to take it. My friend offered her some of the ones I had given her. That girl took it, and she ended up having a severe reaction and getting rushed to the hospital. From that point forward, that is how I got kicked out of high school. That was the second attempt where she was successful. The first attempt was the year prior, where she called in a bomb threat to my high school, said my friend and I were talking in my bedroom that morning about blowing up the school, which was not true. We were being interrogated separately, and we were both very confused, and it was the same school cop in both situations, and it didn't go anywhere. But after that all happened, the teacher who had hugged me and realized there was a problem with my mother, she realized that my mother had orchestrated all of that and that she was lying. I then talked to my dad after school that day on the phone, and he knew that my mother had done this as well. So it came out of, some information came from the two of them that's what was behind all of that. And so she managed to get me removed from school. But it was all on false pretenses. It was all orchestrated that way. And the psychiatrist, my mother, and the Brownstown police should have been charged with what had happened to me. With what all happened, my friend and I were supposed to be released to our parents. No criminal charges were supposed to be filed. And it was my mother who stayed behind about a half hour after I left with my dad. And she got the police to put out a warrant for my arrest. Me not knowing anything about it, because we were all told we were being released to our parents. So a few years ago, when this paperwork showed up at my house with a lot of the proofs that I do have, that's when I verified with my friend, who I still have contact with. I verified that that was the situation, and she said, yes, that's correct. No charges were ever filed. I was released with my mother. That's what was supposed to happen to us. And I said, well, that's not what happened to me. So all of those people are involved in why that all occurred in the first place. It's just so absurd with what all happened. So because of that situation, she was able to paint me to look like I have this drug problem, or make it look like I just don't know how to get through life, or I don't know how to make proper decisions, or the way she was painting it to others, because she always wanted me to be like in trouble. So she could keep telling people what a bad kid I am. Oh, I'm just so bad. I'm this bad teenager. I'm this bad kid. And these words continued on from that point all the way, all the way to where we are today in 2025. I do have recordings in the most recent few years where my mother is talking and she is being recorded, and you can tell that she is still referring to me as that child. I'm 41 years old. So there's numerous recordings over the last handful of years where she is referring to me as being that child. Mind you, there's been no contact, no relationship for over 20 years. There was never a relationship from day one, from the time I was born. And she's not been a part of my life since I turned 18 and purchased my first home. You can clearly see who the problem is in this situation. But with all that happening, that was where she began to amplify the false narrative about me and grow it into something more. That I'm just this troubled child. I'm on drugs. I'm this, I'm that. I have this mental disorder, which is why I was given these pills. No one's comprehending how that conclusion was come about, because there was no mental disorder. There was no depression. I was a very hardworking teenager with 2 jobs. I was making twice as much as my mother was at 16 years old when all this happened. And you could tell that everything she was saying was not real. So this can all still be verified today. But the whole point was to make me appear a certain way And then in the background, as she had done from the time I was a small child, since I had confronted her about the poisoned food, she continued to control the false narrative about me with every family member she has. So all of these family members, these hundreds of family members, including the ones closest to her and the ones a little further out, 100% got their information about me or who they think I am from her every step of the way, all of these decades. When I turned 18 and purchased my first home, I cut all contact with my entire family as well. So none of these people had contact with me all of these years, all these decades. Everything they were ever told about me came 100% from her mouth. So she grew it and grew it and grew it and then continued on with it. Once I was moved into my own home at 18, didn't tell anybody I cut contact with her, didn't tell anybody there's no relationship. She did the exact opposite. She continued to make people believe that we've always had this relationship, that I'm just this bad kid, that I shouldn't have kids, that I have this mental disorder, this drug problem, I can't take care of myself, other people pay my bills. She continued that on every day, every year. That was still going on this year. I don't know how many people have seen the video that I released a few months ago, but everybody believed that entire false narrative from 2002 when I purchased my first home, and there was no her being no part of my life, all the way to the current day until a few months ago when I released the video talking about all of this. But these people, all family members, all these hundreds of people, family members, friends, neighbors, coworkers, they got all of their information that they perceived to be true about me from my deranged mother. That information is 100% false. How could she know anything about me when there's no relationship, no context? She has no role in my life, no part in my life. Part of the reason this was able to be pulled off is because she remained married to my dad, and she's hiding behind my dad and her Beaumont job all of these years because my dad is neurotypical and my mother is not. And by her keeping her Beaumont job for 45 years, it made her look extremely credible. So that was an illusion. And with her being married to my dad and my children and I keeping a separate relationship with my dad at my homes, and I just never went to their homes, that allowed that false narrative to grow even further with anybody who's hearing this information. Because then my mother would place delusional phone calls behind the scenes, either at work or at home, while nobody's around her. And she would tell people how she has custody of my older two kids because I'm just this hot mess, this mental disorder drug addict running the streets, so unstable. And then because we maintained a separate relationship with my dad would pick up my older two kids and they would go to this party or this family function or whatever's going on. Here and there, he would pick them up, and because they're married, my parents would show up there with my kids. Now, I would be releasing my kids into my dad's care because he was there with them. He would be the one taking care of them when they were with him. But with my mother's delusional phone call placing behind the scenes prior to these events happening, then they appear together and they're all there together, and it makes it look like the delusions that she had told everybody is all true because here they are all together and I'm nowhere in the picture. So she made everybody think I was just off running the streets, off in my own little world, just made everybody believe that I'm the exact opposite of who I truly am as a person. So none of that was ever real. They'd always lived with me. I'd have custody of all of my kids. She pulled all of that off. It was all an illusion, and her being married to my dad is what helped pull that illusion off. So that's where she continued on more of the false narrative, where then they would appear at these places together, and then she would mix and mingle with different groups of people, and she'd plant herself and visit each little group of people with all these people around, and be a little busybody and tell this group about all this stuff about me, and then she'd come over here and tell this group, come over here, and she'd do that at every little party she went to. And it looked believable because there my kids were with both of my parents since they're married. And this is all going on behind my dad's back. My dad's completely unaware any of this was going on. So the false narrative grew even further during all of those times. Mind you, this is like between the time I was 18 and probably in my early 30s. After the 2013 escapade that my mother caused, the entire chaotic disaster where she destroyed everything I was building, kidnapped my kids, and had completely wiped me out, and this went on for about 5-6 months. She completely financially wiped me out when I was getting ready to cash out on a home. And I had 3 successful businesses, all very successful. I was very, very busy. I used to work out every day, drive my kids to school every day. She disrupted all of that with that escapade. So from that point forward, my kids were only limitedly allowed to go with my parents, and there was a significant period of time where they were not allowed to go over there at all due to the ruckus that she had created, and my dad helped her carry it out. So I removed them from being allowed to go over there for some time. And then once I got in the home that I'm currently in 2017, we then started allowing my dad to come to my home more regularly the way he had all these other years. Again, she's still not welcome in my homes. But the false narrative continued to grow every step of the way. That 2013 escapade, she had numerous agendas. She was trying to get custody of them through the fathers without actually having custody, because there is no grandparents' rights where we live in Michigan. Now, at the root of all this, what she was trying to do, she was attempting to gain access to more of the stolen trust funds, which she had already fraudulently gained access to, that belongs to me. So when all of that happened, it significantly changed how we went about things and everything going forward from that point. A few years later, my youngest child was born, and because of that 2013 escapade, I then knew that he would never be allowed to have a relationship with her. So once we were in the house I'm in now, it remained that way, with just us keeping a separate relationship with my dad. So I guess during that whole time since I had purchased this home, she had been lying to everybody that my kid's dad had been paid. He bought this house. This is his money, his work. He pays all the bills here. She couldn't let anybody know the truth because she had spun such an extreme false narrative about me, that she didn't tell anybody the truth, that everything's mine. This is everything I was building as a single individual, that I've worked for everything I have. Nobody's ever helped me. He wasn't even contributing half of the bills when he was here for the short period of time that he was here when I first had this house. And the only reason he was here was due to that 2013 escapade and the fallout and the chaos and the destruction and all the pieces I had to pick up with what she had caused during that situation. So she did not tell anybody the truth, that everything was mine and I'm 100% self-made, self-built. Not only that, but I had other homes that I owned previous to this home. She also did not tell anybody that I also paid all of my own bills at every home I've ever had since I was 18 years old, that I've been a single independent woman from the minute I became an adult at age 18. I have been a full-blown adult and mother the entire time. And I have been gainfully employed from the time I was 16. I've had a very good job, making about 50 to 100 grand a year since I was 16 years old. Numerous streams of income every step of the way. She did not tell anybody any of that. She had all of these hundreds of people believing that, yes, I'm just this mental disorder drug addict. My dad's been paying my bills. Other people pay my bills. I don't know what exactly she told people, but it helped grow that false narrative about me even further with those statements she was making about my situation that were not real. So this was allowed to continue on all of these decades. And then once I became injured in 2018, she then furthered the false narrative by preventing treatment within the traditional medical system, where she was still an employee before she retired, when we were left in an extreme medical emergency, my younger son and I. But remember, he is not allowed to have a relationship with my mother. So she made sure we did not receive treatment in that extreme medical emergency. And her intent was for us to not survive. Because if we did not receive oxygen treatment or hyperbaric oxygen treatment, we were not going to live. And she knew that. So she played a huge role and why we did not receive treatment. Again, at the root, she needs me incarcerated, deceased, or deemed mentally incompetent on paper so she can gain access to the rest of this trust fund that she has been attempting to gain access to. So that was part of the reason that that occurred. But long term, she also withholds medical treatment as well to create physical, mental, and emotional pain and suffering. Now, with my injury being so extreme, I did lose a solid 5 years of my life, complete incapacitation for over 3 years. It was very extreme. And then she tried to portray to others that I've just always had this mental disorder, and brainwashing my dad and my older kids, which then trickled down to my ex as well. And the delusions still come out of all of their mouths today on that situation. At no time was this ever a mental disorder. This was an extreme physical injury, extreme medical emergency, extreme brain swelling, suffocation, 50, 60 severe symptoms at once, ongoing every second of every day. 3 years went by before there was 1 day of relief. And she portrayed that entire time to look like I had a mental disorder and was repeating this to those in my household the entire time. And it created even more chaos within my household when I could not have sound. My brain was raw, open, swollen, overloaded in an extreme manner with heavy neurotoxicity, and I could not tolerate sound. These people were screaming in my home, forcing me to scream back when I was supposed to be in an inpatient situation. And eventually, this began being treated on an outpatient basis through my own life's work, my own merits, and my own money. I barely got us to the facility and back for it was a good 2 years before I crossed that first threshold where I could safely get us there and back. But the treatment did not begin until 14 months from the time the medical emergency occurred. That was all at the hands of my mother. So she used all of that time period to further the false narrative, create the problems using other people. And then once the chaos was so extreme from them screaming and repeating delusions and saying things to me and not wanting to believe the reality of how serious this injury is, and because we're not receiving treatment in the traditional medical system, then that's where the agencies began harassing me. And she's in the background using these agencies to harass me as well. They're showing up at my house, police, CPS, all types of people. And this was going on repeatedly. So now she's trying to get more like documentation on paper that this is really the situation. Oh, see, she's always had this mental disorder. None of that was ever real. So she managed to pull all of that off, all of that time, grew this even further. And while all this went on for a few years in that extreme manner. She then is there, she is on the phone in the background, calling her hundreds of family members and friends, telling all these people all this false information about me. And then once I had crossed that first threshold and we started to see a light at the end of the tunnel, yes, we were still under daily treatment for some time. We stayed under regular treatment for 6 years. And we are still treating that initial medical emergency today with the home chamber that I have. But shortly after crossing that first threshold, several months later, Ford Motor Company here by my house in Flare Rock then spilled 15,000 gallons of liquid gasoline into the sewer system. And because of my brain tissue being open from the brain injuries from my initial injury, that is part of what was being repaired with the hyperbaric oxygen treatments, along with moving the abundance of carbon monoxide from my cells, from my tissues, from my brain. And once all that was happening, that's when the Ford gas leak happened. So that gas leak was so extreme that not only was I forced away from my home, just like there was numerous other households in this area also forced from their homes, but my situation was already an inpatient injury being treated on an outpatient basis. The brain tissue wide open. We can't take in particles of any kind. Doesn't matter if it's not carbon monoxide. It can't be chemicals, toxins, or particles of any kind, because the protective barrier that coats one's brain from any of that stuff getting into one's system is still broken within my brain. And at the time this happened, my son's brain was still more open than it is today. So that is what forced us from our home. My mother inserted herself in that situation. She was able to convince somebody at the top of Ford Motor Company and the people at my city who were running the entire situation, convinced them all that I've always had this mental disorder, this drug problem, and none of what I was saying about having an injury was real. They refused to accept reality. They even reached out to Charmaine and stated the false narrative to her. So that's Charmaine documenting the crimes. So here now, Charmaine's getting another phone call from somebody else. And when she's receiving phone calls from people like this, she's aware that this information is coming from my mother. And then my mother gives them her phone number. So here she's spreading the false narrative all over town, waits for an extravagant situation to happen, and then she inserts herself in it. That whole situation led to me having to pay for even more treatment, all 100% out of pocket. Ford was supposed to be covering all of this, but because they believed the delusional lady making the deranged phone calls to her, that lady cut off our hotel. And because that all happened, I was forced to purchase my home in Ohio when my life plans had already been on hold for over 5 years at this point. Already in an extreme medical emergency, finally starting to be able to pick up some pieces and move forward with all the rest of my business plans, which have been planned 5 to 10 years in advance. So when all that happened, I was then forced to buy my home in Ohio instead of carrying out the plans with my current home that I'm still in and getting on to the next home after this. I was abruptly forced to purchase the one I own in Ohio when that was never part of the plan. I should already be in the next home. That home in Ohio shouldn't exist, and I should be working on the home after that currently. So her criminal actions, her delusional phone call placing, has caused all of this. The false narrative about me has now spread through, every family member, all these hundreds of family members, friends, her neighbors, all her coworkers, all of my city's police department, my actual city town hall, her city's town hall, her city's police department, and now with my dad being injured, the Romulus Police Department and people at many different hospitals and care facilities that my dad has been to, plus the ones where I was seeking treatment and not being treated due to her criminal actions and withholding treatment using others to help her do this. All of that has gone on, and that's where the false narrative has spread to where we are today in 2025. Now, during that gas leak, when here my mother was creating all this chaos during all of that time, she also kidnapped my daughter during that time, and the Brownstown Police Department refused to return her. My daughter was 16 years old when this happened. I'm the only parent on the birth certificate. I've been the only parent parenting her and keeping things running and keeping things in line her entire life. She ends up truant from school. She stayed truant for over a year and a half due to this. And the Brownstown police refused to return her because they believed my mother had custody of her just by her telling them she's got custody of her. That's not real. Those are delusions. Nobody's ever had custody of my kids but me. I tried to report this at least 10 times within a 6 to 8 month period, and she remained truant the entire time. Now she's 20 years old. She's still not graduated. She was allowed to stay truant all that time. And the people who are responsible are my mother and the Brownstown Police Department and the Flat Rock Police Department. So the fact that that was allowed to all happen in the first place is absolutely absurd, because I don't know any teenager that's allowed to stay truant and the deranged granny is allowed to just lie and say she has custody when that's not real. And it created all of this further destruction and some of the problems that are ongoing in the current, because my daughter is still not graduated high school at 20 years old. So every step of the way, this false narrative was grown. With each thing that happened along the way, either naturally or it was, like a man-made situation where my mother was orchestrating the problem to happen. She'll do it by triangulating and pumping people up full of delusions, placing delusional phone calls, and then she gets many different sets of people all pinned against each other, or all pinned against me. But she just says she's the mother, and they believe her. just by saying, "Oh, I'm the mother. Everybody always believes the mother." Ah, ha, 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 ha. And she laughs like a deranged lunatic. So the fact that that was all allowed to go on to that degree, where it grew to every agency, every police department, every family member, friend, neighbor, all these people, it grew and grew from me confronting her on poisoning the batches of food as a small child. So this all grew every step of the way, snowballed to where we are today. And then shortly after I got moved into my house in Ohio at the end of 2022, several months later, my dad had a catastrophic injury where he fell 15 feet from a scissor lift and became disabled from the stomach down. So all of the fallout from that situation is still going on. There's been many crimes that my mother committed during all of that time. You can watch some of my other videos on a lot of what I've mentioned in this video. If you go on the YouTube channel, they're a lot easier to navigate through and see the titles because they're not structured that way on TikTok. But right away, she began plotting her next moves and started to uh, pull different staff members aside behind the scenes, tell them false information about me, grow the false information about me even further. And then here I was catching her poisoning batches of my dad's food during this time, attempting to finish him off. And when I did finally start to report this to some of the facilities, some people initially started to believe me, but once they started talking to my deranged mother, she was able to convince them that I've always had this mental disorder and this drug problem, and I'm always known to lie. I even have this in print. There's many different pieces of documentation where this is in print. So I do know that that's what she was telling all of these people. There was one hospital who did start to see the Munchausen by proxy pattern of the repeated visits, because the pattern was very clear. So if you line up all the visits from the time of his injury to the current day, I can tell you exactly what was going on during each rush back. Each rush back to the hospital. So she slowly slowly manipulated each hospital and the care facility. It took a little over a year for her to manipulate everybody to that degree. But all of the excessive injuries that he suffered from having the trach tube and then going blind, those were the results of her poisoning the batches of food and trying to finish him off. I warned the care facility and the hospital in advance of both of those incidences separately. And we have Charmaine documenting all the crimes long term. I called all of this in advance. She also has this documented in advance of this happening. So by the time she had caused so many problems with my dad's care, my dad's situation, and then repeating all these delusions and her being a retired hospital employee and knowing how to climb the ladder and say the right things to the right people, by doing that and telling those people different lies and delusions about me, then they're able to ban me because then they just believe her because they see her as a fellow hospital employee, a credible person. She says she's my mother. Oh, everybody believes the mother. And then they just believe her because she puts on a mask. She puts on a whole fake personality that is not who she truly is behind the scenes. And that's how she was able to carry things out to such an extreme degree that I was banned from my dad. Now, what I've recently figured out is that technically I am listed as one of the guardians on my dad's case. That is not what was said in court on the original court date. Although I did speak to somebody today and he said, no, you're one of the guardians. Well, that's not what was said in court. And I wasn't sent any paperwork to return. And then when I did try to see my dad after that, they had called 911 on me immediately. And it's because of the false narrative that she has spread to these people. She tells people that I have threatened them with a gun, one or both of them with a gun, and that I'm mentally unstable. And none of that's ever been real either. Those are delusions. She uses those words with these care facilities in these hospitals because she knows that that's enough to get somebody banned from a hospital. As a hospital employee, she's aware of this. So that's the false narrative she started to spread. I believe the first time I was aware that false narrative was being said about me was in 2021. I do have a police report from the Brownstown Police Department in 2021. She reported that after she kidnapped my daughter, refused to return her. It was either her that did it or my dad did it. She had my dad do it. And I have it on paper where it states that that's what that's what she's reporting, that's the situation. And from that point forward, they refused to return my daughter. No, that's a kidnapping. This child is truant in my school district. I have been her only parent. So that's where that narrative, I believe that's where it started. And then it grew from there, grew all the way into my dad's injury, all those hospital situations, me being banned from several hospitals and being banned from my dad. And then prove it. She was trying to prove to everybody that I stole money from him and my power of attorneys were fake. And I can prove every bit of it that hers were fake. And every step of the way, she has fabricated, lied, and I have 100% proof to prove who has committed the crimes, even though I've been the one accused of the crimes that she's committed. The problem is she has manipulated every person involved at every level in the situation, and they just believe her, and all of them refuse to investigate. Now, it is possible she's bribing them with money, because some of these people have also taken bribes along the way to help create problems in my life. As long as they can get me deemed mentally incompetent on paper or incarcerated or deceased, then they will help her. They're going to be able to help her gain access fraudulently to the rest of the trust fund that belongs to me. So some of these people were involved even longer than that, and some have been helping long term. But that is what she has done with all these individuals, police departments, agencies, use them all every step of the way to carry this out, to carry out this false narrative, get a lot of this like legally in court documents along the way. The kidnapping of my two older kids in 2013, there's legal documents stating all this false stuff about me at that time. There's more court documents with the friend of the court, which Brownstown Police was saying I need to go to front of the court to get my daughter back. No, it's their job to return my daughter to me from the deranged granny who does not have custody of her. I do, and she's truant at school in my school district where she's been for all these years. So, you know, she was able to pull all of this off very strategically. By doing all of this, getting all these people involved, and then it does go to the friend of the court eventually down the line. After I made numerous visits to the Brownstown Police Department, each one of them refusing to give my daughter back to me because they all truly believed that the deranged granny had custody of her. At no time did it belong going to friend of the court. The friend of the court is for custody between the two parents. There was no problem between me and the father. It became a problem because he is in his own little world and cannot comprehend my mother's malicious behavior, her malicious activities, and the non-neurotypical behavior, because his family is normal. So he cannot comprehend what has actually been going on all of these years. And, you know, he never even met my mother till my daughter was 10 years old almost. And that is exactly why. So it's hard to explain this to somebody who comes from a normal, loving family, because my mother is not neurotypical. She has all of these undiagnosed mental and personality disorders. It has caused all of these problems every step of the way. And it's really hard to explain this to others because nobody wants to believe that things are as extravagant as they are, and that this has been going on nonstop. The harassment and crimes against me has been going on nonstop from the time I confronted my mother on poisoning batches of food and the time that the trust fund was all left for me in the late 1980s. That is the motive behind everything. That is the bottom line of what is causing all of this behavior, all of these criminal actions, all of these strategic plans. That's what's at the root of all of it. And like I said, she is still attempting to gain access to what is left. All of that money belongs being returned to me, the money that's been stolen and the money that's left, because I have worked my ass off my entire life as a self-made, self-built individual. After being completely wiped out financially, 3 solid times down to nothing, forced from homes that I've owned, 3 of them that I own, 2 that I've rented, all due to my mother's escapades, crimes, and harassment. And now I'm under Chapter 13 bankruptcy due to the most recent escapade during the gas spill and what all happened in the fallout of all of that. That is what led to me being under Chapter 13 bankruptcy. I am finishing up all of the loose ends with the damage to my home. Over 100 grand in damage was done to my home. That's also due to my mother's delusional phone calls and the fallout from that Ford spill, me being forced away from my home. I should have never been forced from my home. Ford should have continued to pay for my hotel. The only reason it was cut off was due to my mother's delusional phone calls to them and them believing her. So none of that should have ever happened. Literally every problem that I'm currently dealing with and have been dealing with for the past few years is 100% due to her ongoing crimes and harassment against me and the use of all these individuals and agencies who help participate in all of this. So I will be talking more in depth on some of these other situations. There is already videos up on some of what I've talked about, but this false narrative about me has grown, literally grown, like a vegetable farm has grown from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. It grew even bigger like a snowball, grew even bigger and bigger and bigger, and she grew it to where it is today. And um, truly, arrests need to be made. They need to be made immediately. There are so many crimes that have happened. There is so many different police officers threatening to arrest me falsely some more because it's already happened. Threatening to arrest me some more to cause more problems in my life. Matter of fact, they're waiting to come back to my home to drag me from my home some more and do it again. Now, when they have done this in the past, they have caused significant re-injury to the already existing injury that I've been dealing with since 2018. My situation is very fragile. My system is very fragile. My brain tissue is very fragile. It's been that way every step of the way. I'm quite a ways away from daily treatment. I would say daily treatment, 2 to 3 more years with the chamber that I have, or even I need an upgraded chamber really, but that is that's where I'm at before getting myself to a more manageable place where it's not such a fragile situation. I live with ongoing symptoms every day. They were very extreme for about 3.5 years, but there are re-exposures and re-injuries, and some of these police officers have created some of these re-injuries, and it has caused significant setbacks and a significant amount more of pain and suffering that I'm forced to deal with my brain bleeding at times, and my inner ears swelling up, some of my brain tissue swelling up where it is still open. The entire thing was open underneath my scalp. Where I am today, 2/3 of it I'd say is about closed in the front. This area in the front and down to my ears and my nose, that part is still open. But because of those re-injuries, that's why it's that far open still today. I had already been through quite a bit of treatment before all these additional re-injuries happened, and I was ahead of where I am now. But it's due to these police officers taking my mother's delusional phone calls about me, this false narrative, and them operating as if that's real, them believing other people pay my bills here, or that this isn't my home, or that I haven't worked for everything that I have, and they operate on whatever delusion she's telling them. On top of the fact that I'm 100% certain she's been telling all these people, hundreds of people, including the police departments and her family, that I've been running around threatening people with my gun. So those are all 100% delusions. I have all the proof in the world for arrests to be made. There's so many people who need to be investigated. These are RICO crimes. I have a list of the agencies and the individuals who have participated. I'm sure there are several that I don't know of, but once an investigation happens and each person is questioned individually, you will be able to find the remaining few people that I'm unaware of, because this is just so large scale and it's gone on for so long. You can't possibly expect me to have every person and agency and every name. Although I have done videos where I have released a lot of this already publicly. But all of this stemmed from me confronting my mother on poisoning batches of food, and then the trust fund being left for me shortly after that, with her never having any intention on ever notifying me of it and making sure that she gets to keep it and not me. That's also part of the reason for the false narrative, so she could portray me to look like the 3 stipulations that were within the trust, where she would get to access it if I'm deemed mentally incompetent on paper, incarcerated, or deceased. And that's what she was going for from day one when the false narrative started growing about me. that was the intention, was so that I would look that way to other people, so that I would appear that way to others and all these agencies and all these people. And that way she could say, that's why it hasn't been given to me. And then once I had my children, even though I owned my own home already and was gainfully employed for some years, she just continued on with, oh, she can't care for herself and she's incapable and she's this and that. No, I 100% paid all of my own bills all of this time. And in my first home, my bills remained paid 3 months ahead the entire time I owned that home, for the 6 years I owned that home. And I had already bought a second home during that time period as well. So this woman is a deranged lunatic. There are many individuals involved in all of this. It is all based off of 100% false narrative. And one way or another, I will be clearing my name. So, yeah, stay tuned for more, because there is all of these additional attempted murders that are in the mix that my mother has also gotten away with. And there's more to it, but I'd like to keep the videos under an hour if possible. So I'm going to cut this one right here. I'll be back to talk about more of it and a few of the other subjects and current situations that are going on. I know it's taken me a while to upload another video, but because of all the fallout to all of this, which has been ongoing for so long, and I have so many things running, and I'm permanently injured, permanently disabled, but I do work for myself. I do have to stop and address, because there's just so much fallout, so much chaos. I have to stop what I'm doing from time to time and just address one situation to try to help get everything back in order. There are just so many things that are out of order, all because of the harassment and the crimes and the delusional phone call placing and all the agencies and people harassing me. So that is why it has taken me a while to get this next video up. I will be back on a regular schedule of filming, these next several weeks. And yeah, there's no way around it. Sometimes I do have to stop everything I'm doing and I have to address this or that, just to catch that section up or this section up, which I know I did a few weeks ago, but there are so many situations running concurrently. I again had to stop what I was doing to address another major situation. So that is what has taken me so long. I will be back to filming regularly and releasing the videos regularly, and I will be back to talk about more of this. Thanks. Bye.